Hi, my name is Dorothy. I am 21 years old, but I will tell you about what happened 2 years ago. What are you willing to do for your dream? Watch this video. I will tell you how, for the sake of a happy future, I became a girlfriend of 375 guys at once. I worked in the land of Oz. Everyone already laughed about it. This is just a hardware store. We sold everything from bicycle locks to refrigerators. Of course, this was not a dream job, but when I worked here, I could save a little money every week, and if everything went as planned, I'd have enough for my first semester of college. And if I got the highest marks after the first semester, I could get a grant and study further without thinking about money. I vowed to be an oncologist at my dad's funeral. He died of cancer, and I've been lonely ever since. I smiled at the customers, listening to the joke, "Dorothy, where's your scarecrow?" for the 100th time, and explaining the difference between all the phone chargers we sold. In April, I suddenly became Employee of the Month. This was very cool. Of course, not the photo at the entrance, but the fact that I received a good bonus and was able to pay for the first semester at the university's medical college. I was one step closer to my dream. The university seemed to me a magical country where the mind and desire to learn were valued, not money. I studied with guys and girls who came in cool cars, but they didn't think I was beneath them. What was or will be your first day of college? Share your dreams or your memories in the comments. We drank coffee together after school, prepared for tests, and chatted about little things. I started getting invited to parties. At first, I refused. My studies were more important. Then I thought that if I relaxed a little after the lectures, nothing terrible would happen. The professors liked me, and I thought I was very purposeful. I noticed that at parties, guys were willing to meet me even though I was not the prettiest girl there. I asked one of them what was wrong. He hesitated and replied that I, unlike others, was very natural. What did he mean by that? Didn't I have enough makeup? One of the guys persuaded me to start a video blog so I could tell what I saw around me, what was new to me, what was not clear, such a diary about life. Suddenly, a lot of people signed up for me. I didn't expect so many people to want to know what our cafeteria food was, why plumbers didn't like dorms, and what the campus looked like at 7 in the morning. Meanwhile, my studies were becoming more difficult. I was down on average marks. However, all my new friends studied the same way, if not worse. But they didn't need grants. Our biology professor called me to her and asked me to come to my senses. Otherwise, I wouldn't get a grant. I tried very hard to become the best in all subjects again, but it was too difficult. I was constantly called to hang out. It was very difficult to say no. I told myself every time, this is the last wild night, then just study, and each time was not the last. Once, we were walking with the girls through the shopping center. They went to buy dresses for the party, and I just wanted to keep them company. Suddenly, a guy I'd never seen before popped out of the boutique. He asked if I was Dorothy, who ran the video blog. I replied that it was me. He asked if I was telling the truth when I said I wanted a belt from this boutique. I did mention it, so I nodded my head. He ran into the boutique, but then came back and handed me the same belt. I said I didn't have any money, but he said it was a gift. He was happy to please me, and in return, he wanted me to mention his name in my video blog. I agreed, and in the next release, I thanked Sid Jones for the cool belt. And then it started. When I mentioned in my blog that I wanted something, someone gave it to me. I received gifts every day, and every day I thanked the givers. I was so engrossed in the story of gifts that the end of the semester was a sudden surprise for me. Not pleasant. My marks were so-so. I don't think it was just because I had given up on my studies. Some of the professors seemed to have graded me lower than I deserved. Someone judged me for the gifts, and someone was just jealous. But there was no hope for a grant. Goodbye, university. Hello, land of Oz. I was packing when I got a message. Some guy wrote that he was ready to send me money and wanted me to become his girlfriend. What did he take me for? I was furious. I wrote him everything I thought about these types of earnings. But the guy said that I misunderstood him. He didn't mean anything by it. I just needed to say in the new video that I had a boyfriend. His name was Leo Katz, and he would immediately transfer the money to my account. He wrote that he was the only guy in our college without a relationship, and everyone laughed at him. Do your friends also believe that not being in a relationship means being a failure? Write in the comments. I didn't care. Anyway, my video blog would end soon. I couldn't tell how I sold refrigerators and juicers. And I agreed, and this Leo actually transferred money to me. The video about my relationship with Leo got a lot of comments. A lot of guys wrote to me to leave this loser and start a relationship with them. I was very ashamed. Leo texted me again. He said it was a great opportunity to make some money. He would write to a couple of guys in a personal message saying, "Offer Dorothy money and she will declare you her boyfriend." I thought it was a stupid idea, but it was a chance. Last chance to stay in college for at least another semester. And Leo's idea worked. The next guy paid twice as much as Leo. The third paid 5 times more. I was saving money, and I felt that my goal was getting closer. The face of my next virtual boyfriend was very familiar. I met him at the parties of the rich boys and girls of our college. He agreed to my terms. The amount was such that I even hinted in the video that I was almost engaged to him. I understood that for him, such money was nothing. His mummy could give him out more for ice cream. In addition, he made a great ad for me, telling his friends how to make me declare my love in my video. There was a whole line of rich boys waiting for me. First only from our college, and then from all over the city. Although I was queen of the internet, in real life, behind my back, I heard whispering. And from those same rich boys who arranged auctions for the right to become my boyfriend. I met a girl from the group once. She told me that the boys thought I was a village idiot who thought I was a star. About the guy who appeared on my channel, they said, visited the hayloft. The girl said I was a disgrace. But I felt like I was buying my dream with their money. If I couldn't get a grant because of the rich boys, let them pay for my education. So I finally got enough money to finish my studies. I calculated that I declared 357 people as my boyfriends. And I released the last video. In it, I told the whole story. I started with why I needed to become an oncologist, how I wished people would stop dying from cancer. Then, I told how hard it was to raise money for university if you didn't have rich parents, and how those whose parents easily paid for their studies did not appreciate what was given to them, and how I lost my way, preferring hanging out to serious study, and how my friends seemed to be laughing behind my back because I couldn't afford expensive clothes and entertainment, and how I decided to raise money for studies from those who were more fortunate than me. I gave all the names and all the sums received. I thanked everyone. I said that when I become a doctor and save people's lives, every life saved would have their contribution. That any situation could be changed for the better and do a good thing. When my video got 10 million likes, I closed the channel. The biology professor called me back. She said she saw the video. She admitted that she thought I was a girl with only guys on her mind, but now she knew I was different and that I would definitely achieve my goal. I am now in my 3rd year. I'm the best student in medical school. And if I don't give up on my studies, I have a degree grant waiting for me. But there are still rumors on campus about a girl who had 375 boyfriends. However, no one knows that that girl is me. Put a like if you like my story. Subscribe to the channel. There will be a lot more interesting things here. Click the bell icon to avoid missing anything. And let your dreams come true without sacrifice on your part.
Hi, my name is Christy, and I turned 17 this year. Before, I just loved riding a fast bike, but due to a broken bicycle chain during one of these trips, I got a terrible spinal injury and became a hostage to my own body. I remember very well how my life was divided into before and after in an instant. Losing control, I screamed and flew off my bike onto the road. That's all I remember until I fell into darkness. I woke up a couple days later in the hospital. My body was in a full body cast and unable to move. However, I am lucky. Despite the fact that my legs barely obey me after the injury, I have loving and supporting parents and a boyfriend, Matt. Despite this terrible incident, we became only closer. Matt gave me his word that he would never leave me. We even decided to go to the same university together after high school, so that we would never break up. After undergoing rehabilitation, I remained a disabled person who always walked on crutches, but I was still able to fully attend school. Now my future depended only on a mock test. I waited for the results with excitement. I left half the questions unanswered, and finally, the day came for the test results to be announced. Have you ever failed a very important exam? It was just awful. Apparently, due to a long absence from school, I was not able to prepare for the mock test properly. This meant that there was a chance of falling short on the admission points and letting Matt down. I couldn't let that happen. While dealing with my school problems, Matt became a lacrosse player. At his first match, I sat in the front row and cheered him the loudest. Some guy from middle school started bothering me. He asked, "Why do you need these things? Are you old?" I tried not to pay attention to this upstart and just enjoy the match. But he kept asking, "Do these things grow out of you?" Because I wasn't paying attention to him, he reached for my crutch and snatched it out of my hands. I tried to take it back, but I couldn't help but fall down the bleachers. Everyone turned to look at me and whispered softly, trying to figure out what had happened. Matt interrupted the game and rushed to me, simultaneously taking my crutch from the youngster and publicly scolding him. He shouted that it would be better for him to not come here anymore. As soon as I recovered from the pitch-black darkness, Matt held my head in his lap and squeezed my hand. I looked at him as if he were a real Superman who had saved me from a terrible danger. I didn't want to spend another minute without my hero. While Matt was running for Brilliant Green and bandages to treat my torn knees, I saw the phone he'd left next to me. I would never check his phone, but then the screen lit up and a message from some girl popped up on it. "You're so cool playing lacrosse. Do you want to go for a walk today?" What I saw made me flare up. Had Matt been seeing someone else? Well, why did he need a girlfriend on crutches when there were so many beautiful girls hanging around him? After my boyfriend came back and saw my puzzled face and his phone, he decided to explain that these were just annoying groupies, and I didn't need to worry about it. As we were leaving the game, our mutual friends came up to us and invited us to a party for the first lacrosse game of the year. I used to be a party girl myself, but this time my studies came first. I couldn't let Matt down, which meant I had to prepare brilliantly for the exam. That's why we both declined the offer together, because Matt promised me that he would help with the preparation and our common dream of admissions to come true. But we didn't manage to properly study because someone always distracted us. The endless calls and texts on Matt's phone were driving me nuts. When Matt finally picked up the phone and answered the call, he immediately started packing up. He explained to me that he was still part of the team, so he should be at the party now. and I could handle studying by myself. I was so upset, and I was beginning to wonder if he even wanted to go to the same university together. I blamed myself that because of this failure of the mock test, Matt had given up on me. But that was just the beginning. A couple of weeks later, Matt invited the entire school to his birthday party. Even those annoying groupies came who had been texting him endlessly. But I didn't get any attention from my boyfriend that night. Someone was always hanging around him, congratulating him, giving him gifts, and it was as if I didn't exist to him at all. So I decided to get everyone's attention and wish Matt a happy birthday so everyone could see. I thanked Matt with all my heart for being with me in a difficult moment and not leaving me alone. But it seemed Matt didn't appreciate the effort and interrupted me with a ridiculous joke. It was obvious that he was shy of me. I felt humiliated. Everyone was laughing at me, but Matt didn't save me this time. He just turned away from me toward the guests. I had no choice but to go home in tears and try to erase the evening from my memory. Everything was going downhill, one after the other. First the injury, then the failed test, and now the relationship problems. Not only that, because of my illness, I lost my favorite activity, cycling. Now my boyfriend also began to be shy with me in front of his new friends. After Matt's birthday, we didn't talk about what happened, and he pretended that nothing had happened at all. We both still tried to prepare for admissions, but it was, to put it mildly, with great difficulty. Matt became very irritable, snapping at me on every question. I tried to smooth things over as best I could, didn't run into any problems, and as far as possible, managed to cope with the tasks alone. This preparation was a real hell for me. There was no question of studying when my mind was only on the problems of my relationship with Matt. Well, how can it not be upsetting when your ideal relationship falls apart for no apparent reason? My mother is a very attentive person. She noticed that I had been in a bad mood for several days. I refused to eat and did not leave the house at all. It had been a while since Matt came to visit us. After she asked me about what had happened, I told her about the incident at the birthday party and how he had left me alone to study and went to have fun with his friends. We had always done everything together. And then my mom suggested that we invite Matt to a family dinner and discuss everything in a quiet atmosphere. To my surprise, Matt agreed and came to our house at the appointed time, but apparently he did not want to stay long. He came to tell me that he had already applied to another university where lacrosse players had a large scholarship, and that he and I were not on the way anymore. It was a real blow to me. Was the whole world collapsing in front of my eyes? And I just stood and watched? Is that why our perfect relationship started to erode? Then I thought I had a chance to fix it, and that Matt would change his mind. To do this, I decided to come to his friends, with whom he had spent a lot of time with. Matt was basking in a group of female fans, and when he saw me, he jumped up and started yelling about how he wished I hadn't been there. In a huff, I went out and started down the stairs, but Matt caught my hand on the landing and confessed that he couldn't see me anymore because of my disability. In 1 second, I lost everything. In shock at what I heard, I staggered back and did not notice the step, and I tripped and fell down the stairs. I had deja vu as I again got out of the impenetrable darkness. Matt was no longer with me, but the doctor. I was already expecting the worst prognosis for myself, but the doctor told me that I had a chance to get my life back on track and get rid of the crutches. Now, I had to choose between my health and going to university. Who I didn't expect to see in the hospital was my boyfriend. Or, I should probably say my ex-boyfriend. Matt came into my room with my favorite donuts and told me that he wasn't allowed to study at the university giving the lacrosse scholarship. He said he was sorry for his embarrassment of my disability and that this was just a test that he went through and realized that he loved me. I forgave him. We began to rebuild our relationship and to be together no matter what. What about the university? Matt suggested that we go together next year. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new stories.
Hi, I'm Laura, and I'm 18. Tell me, does your boyfriend have habits that piss you off? Watch my story till the end and find out how I got involved with a guy who constantly makes nasty noises. I always had troubles with guys at school. Actually, I've just never had a boyfriend because I had other things to do than chase guys, like going to college. What guys? But I got involved in a stupid bet. My besties made a bet that each of us would come to the next party with a guy, and I agreed just to keep up. It seemed like there was a lot of time before the party, and then there was only a week left. And as before, I had no boyfriend. I took a train to my hometown and felt disheartened. We put money on the bet. The amount wasn't big, but I still didn't want to lose. Okay, what if we imagine for a moment that I backed out of the bet? It was so embarrassing. Was I really so pathetic that I couldn't even find some loser to go on a single date? As luck would have it, a handsome, fit guy with a brilliant smile sat in front of me. He was eating chips, and I was too embarrassed to look at him. Then, it dawned on me. I have a cousin the same age as me, a relative distant enough that I definitely hadn't mentioned him in front of my friends. What if he could help me? I wrote him a message saying, "Meet me at our place. Hurry up, there is money involved." I mentioned that to be sure that he'd answer. And suddenly, I heard a disgusting sound. It turned out that the guy in front of me finished his chips and suddenly burped. I tried to pretend that I didn't notice that, but he continued to make burp noises, and then he gazed at me. Have you ever received attention from someone totally disgusting? The guy walked over to me. I smiled tightly, moved away, and pretended to have a keen interest in the landscape outside the window, and hoped that he would get the hint. I received the SMS at the same time as the guy burped again. I opened it and groaned out loud. My cousin was out of town for the whole weekend. The vile sounds that the guy was making suddenly began to not seem so vile. I looked at him appraisingly. He smiled in response, clearly deciding that I was flirting. But what should I have done? It was a desperate situation. I started making eyes at him. He was the first to start the conversation by asking, "Where are you going?" That's how we got acquainted. His name was Matt, and apparently being too happy made his disgusting sounds even louder. At the nearest station, I went out to get some air and call Ellie, but Matt followed me. At first, we were even flirting, but Matt could not contain his urge and burped when the guard was passing by. The guard turned around with such a stupid face that I burst out laughing and couldn't stop. Then Matt burped again. The guard asked to me. I thought we'd better stop, but as luck would have it, I just laughed harder. The guard frowned and walked towards us. Then Matt screamed, "Let's run!" And we ran away. What a nonsense! I should have said immediately that I wasn't with this idiot and calmly leave. And while we were hiding, the train had already gone. What was I supposed to do then? Matt asked why I was so worried, and I told him the whole truth about the party, the stupid bet, and that I was ready to invite him with me, but we wouldn't get anywhere now. Having said that, I got pretty embarrassed because I really liked Matt when he wasn't burping. Well, Matt replied that in that case, getting to the party was a matter of honor, and we would go there by bus, and that he would pay for the tickets. We found a bus station, and quickly things began to get better, which meant that I had the opportunity to think about what would come next. I colorfully imagined how I would appear at the party with Matt. It turned out beautiful and exciting. Then, it was embarrassing and unpleasant. When we were buying tickets, Matt stopped making those sounds. But then, when we took our seats, He started burping again. The passengers began to turn around and someone even made a remark. But Matt just grinned back. The longer the ride was, the louder the disgruntled passengers were. Even the driver began to glance at us unpleasantly, but Matt didn't seem to care. I poked Matt in the ribs a couple of times, trying to shut him up, but that made him burp more, with a story with a guard in mind. I tried to pretend that I wasn't with Matt and that I was a victim like everyone else on the bus, but the passengers weren't convinced. Soon, they started reproaching me, telling me to shut my boyfriend up. And when a woman even yelled at me, Matt unexpectedly and rudely shut her up, ordering her not to speak to his girlfriend in that tone. The woman said that he was not the one to be talking to her about manners. After discussing for so long, the driver stopped the bus an hour's walk from the nearest stop and told all the dissatisfied passengers to get off there. Of course, everyone considered us to be the dissatisfied passengers. I didn't know what to do. It was disgusting to be with Matt, but without him, I wouldn't have ever reached the town. Matt, as if he was not a bit upset, offered to go hitchhiking. He stood by the curb and boldly raised his hand. We caught the first car quickly, but Matt burped a couple of times, and the driver asked us to get out, being afraid that next, Matt would be vomiting in the car. In order not to waste time, we continued the rest of the way on foot. Sometimes Matt would burp again, and every time I didn't know whether I should get angry or burst out laughing. What would you do if you were me? Despite all his disadvantages, Matt was a pretty nice guy. He noticed that I was tired of the long walk, and when we got to the nearest gas station, he offered to take a break and even laid his jacket on the border so that I could sit down and not get my dress dirty. He left me to go and do something. I didn't want to think about that as he had already done enough nasty things before. I texted Ellie a couple of messages saying that I was on my way with a boyfriend and I'd probably be late but definitely will come. And I thought the situation started to get funny as it turned into a surprise for my friend. Cheered up, I went to look for Matt. Suddenly, I heard his voice. He was standing around the corner. I heard that Matt was talking to someone on the phone. I only heard, "Yeah, she's with me." And literally a second later, Matt hid his phone in a pocket and came towards me. He had a bag of chips with him. So cute. He bought me a snack. But who was he talking to? And about whom? Was that conversation about me? I felt uncomfortable, and that nice guy Matt began to seem suspicious, as if he had come straight from a thriller. What if he deliberately prevented me from getting to the city? Who knew what was in that bag of chips? I asked him if he wanted to split the snack with me, and Matt said he couldn't. On the train, he ate the whole bag of chips. So, I threw away the gift just in case. Fortunately, Matt quickly found a man who was prepared to give us a lift to the city. The old man was very kind, and most importantly, he was almost deaf and didn't even hear Matt's burping, which continued as soon as we sat in the car. And then, having gone through the hell of the countryside highways, we returned to civilization. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation at the gas station. I thought about trying to throw Matt off on my way, but he stuck to me and even found the road to Ellie's place faster than I figured it out on the city transport map. Nervously, I asked if he had any other plans for the evening, and he confidently replied that he cleared his entire schedule specifically to be my boyfriend today. Well, why not take him with me? If he really was some kind of maniac, I'd better find it out around my friends who would be ready to protect me. But when we entered my friend's house, I stopped being afraid that Matt would drag me into an alley and kill me, and I began to fear that he would burp in front of everyone. And it happened. Matt opened his mouth wide like a whale and made such a strong and disgusting sound that all the guests turned to us. I was ready to sink into the ground or escape back onto the highway or anything. And then Ellie came up to us and loudly slapped Matt on his shoulder. "Your pancreas again, goof?" she asked almost gently. And Matt embarrassedly scratched the back of his head and said, "Yes, I ate a bag of chips before the trip." I froze with an open mouth, And Ellie, laughing, explained that Matt was her cousin, and when she found out that we were going to be on the same train, she deliberately asked him to look after me and maybe to get acquainted so that I wouldn't be embarrassed to show up without a boyfriend. I was about to feel offended, but I remembered that I myself was about to involve my cousin in this, so I said, okay. And Matt, chuckling, added that I had an angelic patience and he thought that his burping that suddenly attacked him would scare me away. I replied, what girl would leave a guy just because of a couple of disgusting sounds? And then we went to dance. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new videos.
Hi, my name is Mia. I'm 17. Have you ever argued with your best friend over a boyfriend so that she blocked you and didn't want to see you at all? Watch this video to the end and you will learn how I tried to seduce the fiancé of my close friend to prove that he was a womanizer and how it all ended. I have a best friend, Olivia, who is 19 and about to get married. We were close from childhood, our parents were friends all the time, and we are also now inseparable. I am interested in psychology. I have always been interested in understanding why people act in a certain way. What is the secret of a happy family relationship? How to find yourself in this life? I had a lot of questions, and I hope to find answers to them with the help of psychology. Together with Olivia, we started going to lectures at the psychological club in our town. I read a lot of articles on the internet and shared it with a friend. But then she started skipping classes, and she didn't even have time to read. She met Ed and fell head over heels in love with him. Olivia even stopped talking to me and spent all her free time with her boyfriend. I believe that friendship is stronger than love, but I did not judge Olivia, knowing her romantic and passionate nature. I was curious to see what she saw in Ed. Have your friends ever sacrificed your friendship for the sake of the new guy? Have they rescheduled your meetings, postponed your joint plans, and all for the sake of another passion? And then one day, a month after our last conversation, Olivia called me very happy and said that she was getting married. I was a little offended. My best friend was getting married, and she told me this over the phone, not in person, and I still hadn't met her future husband. But then, Olivia said that the wedding was in 2 weeks, and she wanted me to be a bridesmaid and help with the arrangements. I loved Olivia very much, and I couldn't say no to her. I was happy to help her. We began to choose the place of the ceremony together and ordered a wedding cake from a pastry shop. Olivia really wanted the beautiful memories of the wedding to remain and asked me to find a picturesque place for a photo shoot. I knew a place and suggested my friend to go there, but Olivia was too busy trying on a custom-made wedding dress, so she sent Ed instead. I didn't mind. It was an excuse to get to know him better. We didn't have much time to get to know each other in this pre-wedding rush. I wanted to know what kind of person he was because I was worried about my friend. We went to the coast with Ed and he was very nice and joked all the way. I found myself actually liking him. But friendship was sacred to me. We arrived at the site, took a few test shots, choosing the best angle. And then, during one of those funny selfies, Ed kissed my neck like he was rehearsing a wedding photo. I was embarrassed by what he did. He laughed it off and said that he had imagined Olivia instead of me. I forced a smile, but something inside me skipped a beat. I thought it was strange. I felt awkward. I didn't want to upset Olivia. I decided to finish the photo session and quickly go home. I was uncomfortable being alone with Ed. It was as if nothing had happened to him. He was still sweetly joking and smiling at me. I sent Olivia pictures from the coast, but I deleted that one with a kiss. My friend was delighted with the scenery and thanked me. I was a little ashamed that I hadn't told her what had happened. Although, maybe I was imagining it. Ed was actually posing for the camera, rehearsing a wedding kiss with Olivia. Olivia had to choose a wedding bouquet and decoration of the hall. So we met at the flower salon. When she was discussing all the details with the florist, I decided to go to the coffee shop across the street for coffee because it was going to be a long day. I wanted to cheer up a little. As I walked across the road, I looked around and saw couples in love, and I was very glad that many people found their second halves and lived happily. I even envied Olivia for a second that she too had found the love of her life, and I was now practically without a friend. While I was thinking about it, I looked at the windows of the house that had a coffee shop and saw a couple kissing in one of them. And the guy looked a lot like Ed. I went closer to see, and I was right. It was Ed, and he was making out with a strange girl. I couldn't believe that Ed was cheating on Olivia while she was getting ready for their wedding. I quickly took the coffee and went back with the clear intention of telling Olivia everything. She didn't deserve to be treated like this. She had to know the truth. But when I got back to the store, I found her so happy and in flowers. Olivia chose white roses. She said they were a symbol of her pure love. She confessed that she was madly in love with Ed, and if something happened to him and he disappeared from her life, she would simply die of grief. She wanted me to understand her feelings. And instead of turning Ed in, I didn't say anything. I was afraid of breaking my friend's heart, and I didn't know how best to tell her that Ed was a traitor and a cheater. What would you do if you were me? How often have you had to tell your loved ones unpleasant news? I was confused and upset after this situation. I decided to go to my mother for advice. My mother was always reasonable and fair, and I hoped she would help me. My mother said that cheating was a serious accusation, and it was better to check more carefully to see if I was right about Ed before I told her. But there was still a chance that Olivia wouldn't believe it. Love is blind. We often do not notice or do not want to notice the shortcomings of our second half. The next day, Olivia called me again, tearfully asking me to take Ed to a jewelry store in a nearby town. Only there they sold the wedding rings they needed. And my finger was exactly the same size as Olivia's. I couldn't refuse her. But it was hard for me to do it after what I saw. I didn't know how to behave with Ed. On the way, he was unusually silent and thoughtful. I didn't want to talk to him either. Then, all of a sudden, he said that he had seen me from the hotel window yesterday and knew that I had also seen him with another woman. He thanked me for not telling Olivia about it and asked what he could do for me as a token of appreciation for my silence. He said that he was ready to fulfill any whim of mine, even the most forbidden. I definitely didn't expect this. Actually, I wanted to tell her, but I just felt sorry for my friend. And now I saw that Ed wasn't even sorry for what he'd done and started flirting with me in a brazen way. What an asshole! I was mad at him, but I didn't show it. I had a plan in mind. I said that I didn't blame him for his innocent pranks and was ready to support them. Ed took it as an invitation, stopped the car, and kissed me right on the mouth. I barely managed to turn on the photo mode on my phone and secretly shoot it. Now I had dirt and at least some proof that he was a womanizer and wouldn't miss a skirt. I didn't flirt with him again, and I tried to avoid being close to him all the way. Ed was deeply unpleasant to me. He lied to my best friend and was willing to cheat on her, even with me. We bought the rings. They were very beautiful. Too bad it was all for nothing. After this trip, I planned to open Olivia's eyes so that she would cancel this wedding and not link her life with a traitor. We met at a beauty salon. She was getting a wedding manicure. I decided to start talking about Ed right away. But I started from afar so that I could gradually prepare my friend. I asked her if she was sure she wanted to get married because marriage was for life. And what if Ed was not the right person she wanted and she was badly mistaken in his account? After all, they were so little acquainted and did not have time to get to know each other properly. Olivia looked at me and said I was just jealous. I was offended by those words because I wanted Olivia to be happy and I wanted to save her from a broken heart. She didn't believe my intentions. So I just took out my phone and showed her a photo of me and Ed kissing in the car. The facts should have changed her mind. Olivia saw the picture and burst into tears. I put my arms around her and started stroking her hair, reassuring her that she would find someone better than Ed, that everything was still ahead of her, and this was not the last love of her life. When Olivia calmed down, she looked at me and thanked me for showing my true face before her wedding. Olivia accused me of seducing Ed, called me a traitor, and forbade me to appear at the wedding or in her life at all. That's how I lost my best friend. Olivia demanded that I leave and not spoil her pre-wedding mood and prevent her from preparing further. I left the salon with tears in my eyes. I was so hurt that my friend didn't believe me. We had been through so much with her. I was willing to do a lot for her. And because of some jerk who didn't deserve a hair off of her head, she ended our long-standing friendship. It was my fault too. My plan to expose Ed had failed miserably. Yeah, the photo of me kissing him wasn't the best solution. I looked like a scheming seductress and he looked like an innocent victim. Ed would probably get away with it and blame it on me. Despite Olivia's hurtful words to me, I really wanted to complete my plan. My friend had to be rescued from this freak. He would ruin her life, and I had no choice but to turn to Olivia's brother, Max. He was 20. He'd known Ed longer than any of us, so I doubted Max would take my side. But I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to prevent this wedding in any way possible. I showed Max a photo of me kissing Ed, told him about seeing him in the window with another woman the day before. I begged him to believe me and help me prevent Olivia from marrying this traitor. Max looked at me incredulously at first. And then I told him that Olivia had broken off her friendship with me and forbidden me to go to the wedding. But it didn't matter to me because I only wanted what's best for her, so I was doing everything I could to get Ed out of her life. Have you ever tried to help your friend against his will? Even if he no longer considered you a friend? Max knew what our friendship meant to Olivia and how I felt about her, and he often called us sisters. He knew that I would never wish my friend any harm. So Max agreed to help, but offered to collect even more evidence of Ed's infidelity. We decided to start tracking him. Max said that Olivia and Ed were planning to go to the mall to buy some small items for the wedding. I went there in the hope that Ed would slip up and somehow give himself away and I would take a picture of it. But I was so involved in tracking that I didn't notice when I went towards Ed and Olivia. They saw me immediately. I said hello to them and Olivia pretended not to know me. It stuck with me. She ignored me but forgave Ed, who was really guilty before her, and smiled sweetly at him. I wanted to talk to her again and explain everything. I missed her and our friendship. And then, suddenly, I got a text from Olivia saying that she would be waiting for me in 5 minutes in the cosmetics department. This both pleased and alarmed me. Why did she pass me with such a haughty air? I ran like a bullet to the cosmetics department to find out. Olivia rushed over there, anxious and lost. She looked depressed. Olivia had discovered Ed's texts with a girl, and they had discussed a lot of juicy details about the previous evening when Ed had allegedly met with friends about a bachelor party. Olivia immediately remembered my photo and what I'd said about it, and she had the general impression that Ed wasn't who he said he was, that he didn't love her and had affairs. But Olivia was afraid to cancel the wedding. Everything was already ready. and she asked me for advice on what to do. I reassured my friend and said that I would support her. I had a plan to expose Ed right at the wedding, as if by accident, and he would disrupt the wedding and make a complete freak of himself in public. This would be a lesson for him. Olivia calmed down a bit, came to her senses, and hugged me just like in the good old days. I missed it so much. I was touched and wanted to get rid of Ed, who had caused us so much trouble. The wedding day came. I should have been there with her, but I had to do it without being seen. So I disguised myself as a waitress. No one ever paid any attention to the servants. Ed didn't see me, and no one could ruin our plan. The moment of the solemn toast and the bridegroom's speech came. Ed went on stage, thanked all the guests for coming, and asked them to open the envelopes in which, according to him, a pleasant surprise was waiting for them. All the guests had such an envelope under their plate, where there should have been a personal message with a wish of gratitude from the bride and groom. But instead, there was a photo of Ed kissing a strange girl, and a printed screen of their romantic texts after a stormy night. I followed Ed for the last few days before the wedding, and I was able to collect dirt that would show everyone who he really was. When everyone saw these pictures, many people began to leave the table. There was a noise in the banquet hall, and someone from Olivia's side even tried to kick him in the ass. Have you ever been a guest at a wedding or other family event, and on one where everything went wrong and the celebration turned into chaos and confusion? I watched from the kitchen doorway. The holiday turned into a family tragedy, and Olivia couldn't stand the tension and disappeared from the crowd. I felt sorry for her, but deep down, I felt elated that Ed had been publicly exposed. He realized what the guests really saw and ran towards the kitchen to get out of sight of the angry relatives of the bride. And then he happened to meet my eyes. He saw my happy face and turned red with anger. Ed realized that I was behind the whole show, that I made it. He came at me furiously, as if he were going to kill me. I was even a little confused, didn't know what to expect from him now, and backed away. And then Olivia's parents showed up, and they took Ed by the arm and said they needed to talk to him seriously, and they took him somewhere. I finally exhaled. It was over. My friend was saved. I went home with a sense of accomplishment. I had been very tired over the past week. All of these feelings for Olivia, spying on Ed, development of a plan of retaliation and exposure. I was sleeping it off for 24 hours. I thought Olivia needed some time alone too, so I took a break after the wedding and didn't call her for a few days. And then I decided to dial, but found that her number was not available. I started writing to her in social networks, but she banned me. I honestly didn't understand what was going on and what I had done wrong again. I went to Olivia's house to talk to her in person. Her parents opened the door for me. They greeted me with coolness, not even offering to enter. Her parents said that Olivia was going through a difficult time. She decided to completely erase from her life everyone who had anything to do with this failed wedding and reminded of it. And I wasn't just a reminder. It all started when I took that stupid photo of me and Ed kissing. And this photo led to the fact that, at the request of a friend, I sabotaged her wedding. She needed time to accept it and forget it, like a bad dream. But how could Olivia not understand that I just wanted her to be happy and helped her as much as I could? I didn't think that my desire to reveal the truth would put an end to our long-standing friendship. I just wanted to protect Olivia from an unhappy marriage with a cheating husband, and I ended up on the list of people who should be erased along with bad memories. After all, I had the right to talk to Olivia. I really wanted her to explain her disregard for me and maybe change her mind about me. I waited for her in the park where she was walking her dog and asked for an explanation from her side. And Olivia said she found out something about me. They'd had a long conversation with Ed after the wedding was disrupted, and he'd confessed, apologized, and said that he wasn't the only traitor and that Olivia should take a closer look at her friend. Ed said that from the very first moment he experienced my equivocal glances. And when I went to the sea with him to choose a place for a photo shoot, I kissed him, and he recoiled from me and said that it was extremely mean. Olivia asked me if it was a kiss. I didn't want to lie to her, and I told her that yes, we kissed, but it wasn't like Ed described. But Olivia didn't want to listen to me anymore. She said she was grateful for my help, but she wasn't ready to keep me around just yet. Olivia didn't trust me anymore, and she was right about something. I hid that kiss, deleted that photo. I didn't say anything. I wasn't being friendly. After this conversation, I decided that I would never again intrude and interfere in the personal lives of my friends, even if they make mistakes before my eyes. My friend has the right to live her life as she wants and learn from her personal experience, make her own personal choices, and not listen to the advice of others. If you are touched by my story, please like and subscribe to my channel. Have a good day and let your loved ones always trust you. Hi, I'm Charlie, 16 years old. How do you know your boyfriend is crazy? Someone says that everything is clear immediately with psychos and you just need to look more closely at people. Someone believes that they're hiding for the time being and they really cannot be distinguished from normal people. I thought I'd recognize a crazy guy right away. It didn't work that way. Watch this video to the end and find out what a crazy idea my boyfriend had in bed. I started dating Eugene. Eugene was my friend. We started hanging out at the school movie club, hanging out together, and then we realized that we liked each other. This relationship was the first for both him and me, so we didn't immediately realize that we were in love, and when we did, we didn't know what to do next. Anyway, it was like in kindergarten. I sorta like you. I sorta like you too. Let's date. Here we go. Eugene is still treating me not like a girlfriend, but like a friend who can also be kissed. But okay, I don't mind. Maybe he'll get used to it over time. So for once, he asked me out. To McDonald's. Well, we both don't have much pocket money, and it's still better than being stuck at school. Anyway, we went to McDonald's, and it was nice. And I was chirping like a bird, and Eugene was kind of unsettled. Maybe he was too embarrassed for me. I noticed that, but did not raise a fuss. Well, the guy was shy. What could I do? Would you resent the boy if he didn't behave romantically? I thought I wasn't particularly interested in romance, but there were limits. I was tired of waiting for him to make decisive steps, and I hinted to Eugene that I was lacking romance in our relationship, and I would like something unusual or the relationship might end. Eugene was no fool, and the next day he invited me to his house. Eugene organized a lavish dinner, gave me flowers, and sat me down to watch a funny, stupid melodrama. Well, we were supposed to watch a funny, stupid melodrama. Instead, the link to the movie was broken and a completely different movie opened on the next site under the same name. Bloody slasher about murder. I wanted to stop watching it, but Eugene was suddenly attracted to a new movie. His eyes were bright and he was unexpectedly talkative and cheerful. Alright, I thought, and didn't stop watching. After all, the dinner, flowers, movie plan was fulfilled, and it didn't matter what was on the screen. It was important that Eugene acted like a guy on a date. We had never made out this much before. However, the oddities did not stop there. I went to see him one day, and Eugene was happy and he made coffee for us. And then he went into the other room. I was waiting for him, and out of boredom, I began to look around the room. and saw a large, deep box marked "for the bed." I was confused and began to convince myself that it had to be bed linen. Eugene was a schoolboy after all. He couldn't possibly have something more intimate in there. I endured it for a long time. Then I couldn't resist looking inside. And I saw heads there. Not real, thank God, artificial, but it was enough to shock me. They were so convincing. And there was fake blood. Ugh. I didn't wait for Eugene to return, so I ran away. What was happening was not normal. He obviously got some kind of weirdness. Maybe he showed me that movie on purpose. Ugh. In any case, I decided to be on my guard with him. I started Googling online what it might be. The question, of course, was so-so. Dear Internet, my boyfriend gets turned on by horror movies. What to do? The answers were one worse than the other. Like, movies wouldn't be enough. He would start looking for thrills in other places, and then... So I decided to come to him again and discuss everything. After I had left, he called me several times, but I didn't pick up. Now I went to see him without telling him I was coming. Eugene was so scared. He started stuttering, saying he wasn't expecting me, swearing, saying he didn't clean up. Then I remembered all the horrors from the internet, and I was either scared or angry, but I broke in, went to his bedroom, and opened the door, and got into the branch of Friday the 13th. At first, I almost had a stroke. Then I realized that it was all just a set, but it didn't get any better. Especially because there was a girl sitting in the corner who looked like the Scream Queen from some part of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And what's worse, to find out that your boyfriend is planning to become a maniac, or that your boyfriend is hiding another girl in his bedroom. I opened my mouth and stared at Eugene, silently demanding an explanation. And they better not sound like, "Honey, I found a girl who won't mind making out with me and 3 dummies in ketchup." Of course, all he said was that I had misunderstood. And I left. Maybe it was too dramatic, but my heart was broken. Would you forgive your boyfriend when you saw him in an ambiguous situation, shall we say? I hadn't spoken to him in a week. Again, I searched the internet trying to explain to people on forums that my boyfriend was a potential maniac who wanted to be Freddy Krueger. My mother was not aware of our quarrels. She only said that I should listen to him, understand, try to forgive. Were we in the 19th century when there was only one spouse and no one else? Yes, even then there were divorces. I was not going to date a cheating cosplayer. Eugene wasn't going to give up so easily. He continued to write to me, sent me photos. I opened one and I almost felt sick because the girl was covered in ketchup. If this convinced me of something, it was that we weren't on the same path with his fetishes. Then I got caught at school by his friend Milan. He shoved something like a magazine into my hands and mumbled that Eugene wanted him to give it to me. More excuses? Or, judging by the look of the magazine, he wanted to convert me? Did he think I was going to pour ketchup on me and play the victim of a maniac? But I took the magazine home. There, I saw a sticker on the magazine. Open on page 37. Well, all right, I would open it. I immediately recognized the decor at Eugene's house, adjusted for mannequins, ketchup, and Photoshop. A couple of dozen pictures were put together side by side like in a comic book, and in this comic book, creepy things unfolded. A little funny things, considering this was all happening at my nerd boyfriend's house, but creepy things. By the way, there wasn't just one girl, there were 2 other guys. Maybe they were in the other room? The comic book was accompanied by a letter in which Eugene talked about horror as an underrated genre, about his love for slashers, and about his dream to one day make his cult film. In the meantime, this was his first project. And with the model, he had nothing, and nothing could be. Not with a bunch of mannequins who stared at them. There was a pendant that I wanted to ask my mother for, glued to the letter. Oh, Eugene, you moron. Eugene wrote that he bought the pendant from the comic book feed, and now wanted to save up for a date not at McDonald's, but at least in a coffee shop. Okay, maybe I screwed up a little. Or a lot. I thought I was in a horror movie, but I acted like a character in a stupid drama. I threw a tantrum out of nowhere, suspected the guy of cheating, didn't answer his calls. Everything had to be fixed. And I knew how. I came to him with flowers and told him that I was super pleased, but I agreed to go to McDonald's and watch stupid movies at home. Because romance was in our head, not in expensive restaurants. And I worked his nerves for nothing. And I apologized. That's it. And as compensation, I agreed to watch a slasher for every melodrama he shared with me. We would both suffer and no one was offended. Eugene's next comic was no less wild than the first. And the third made the hair stand on end. It took several months and a dozen comics for me to agree to participate in this trash, and just as much to make me believe that no models claimed my boyfriend except for the purposes of filming. One rule: no mannequins on dates. It's too much for me. And did you suspect people of something terrible for nothing? Or maybe you were suspected for nothing? Tell us about it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.